Okay, guys, real quick, take a look. KD is down to 0.241. I know why. You guys have told me 1,000 times. It's because I'm playing casual, breakthrough, and the bot kills. Bot kills don't count, but my deaths do. I got it. I'm gonna play some real tonight against real people. I still think it's called ranked, right? You guys have smacked me around in the chat saying it's not called ranked. Okay, what's it called? All right. If you guys can't come up with a name for it, I'm going to keep calling it ranked. But also, a lot of people have told me that I point at people's feet that when I'm running and stuff. I think I'm doing better. Watch this. It's not all the way up in center of chest, but for the most part, I think I'm doing pretty good. So I've also, like I said, I read every comment, every single comment, man, thousands of them. I've read every single comment. I don't respond to all of them, but I do read them all. And I've noticed that there's a number of Gen Zers that are getting butthurt that I'm calling them basement dwellers, and a couple of them have gone off about the affordability of housing. And I want to touch on that for a second. In 1979, my father bought a house, December 1979. And assumed a mortgage at 12%. 12%. And he was happy to get it. 1994, I bought my first house. I got it for 8.5%. And was happy to get it. Today's mortgage rate is 6.2%. And yes, I mean, housing is expensive. My first house, my wife had to work and I had to work just to qualify. And our combined income, that house, took half of our monthly pay. When you throw in, utilities, car notes, we didn't have a lot to live on. I think the big problem isn't affordability. It's and the money you're making. I think the problem is that you can't control your spending. You have to eat out all the time. For example, right? My wife read this story this morning in Facebook, basically about the same subject. I'm like, give me that. I want some of it I might use. So in this story, this guy buys like a $28 burger, and then he pays DoorDash to deliver it. So he ended up paying like $48 for a burger. And think about that for a minute. $48, and you could go buy a George Foreman grill for like $30. And go buy a pound of hamburger for $4, and take that pound and quarter it up, so you have a quarter pounder, right? And cook it up on your George Foreman grill, and you could have a hamburger for $1 compared to $48. It isn't. I don't think it has anything to do with the amount of money you're making. I think it has everything to do with how you're spending it. How many emotional support lattes do you drink a day? You run into Starbucks and you get your emotional support caramel macchiato. It costs you $7.50. How many of those do you drink a day? Every day. When I was a kid, by the way, the sons of bitches are always sitting at the top balcony up there. I do love my C4 though. You can sit there and try to blow it. It doesn't do as much damage as I wish it did. But and this is another reason why I like Recon right here, right? I can squat down, and I'm Spec Ops. I've unlocked it, and I'm real quiet. They can't hear me as I move in. So I had a discussion with my father. I was a teenager, and he had to talk with me, about smoking. Back in the 70s, 80s, everybody wanted to smoke. And he said, son, how much is a pack of cigarettes? And back then it was like, $1 a day. He said, okay, a pack a day. He said the average smoking habit's about $1 a day, pack a day, maybe 2 packs if you're heavy into it. He said at $1 a pop. He said that 2 packs a day. He said that's $60 a month. He goes, that's a car note. It was back then. He says you have a choice. He says if you smoke, you're literally rolling tobacco up in a dollar bill and lighting it every day. He said, you have to make a choice. You can go along and do this stuff, or you can use your money wisely and buy things that are important to you, like a car. Rather than smoking, I chose that I'd save up my money to help buy me a car. And I think, Starbucks is today's smoking. It's an addictive, caffeine's addictive, and these people are out there buying Starbucks every damn day. $7.50 a day. Do the math. $7.50 a day times 7, or 30 days is what, $250, $300? That's a car note. Maybe not the best car on the road, but it's a car note. The other thing is that it's like keeping up with the Joneses. Everybody's got to have the latest and greatest whatever. I got to have my latest iPhone. I got to have my latest Galaxy, Samsung Galaxy phone. Whatever. $1,200 every year, right? For a phone. Yeah, really? My phone's like 4 years old. I buy a phone. I use it until Apple, finally kills it, or the battery finally blows up. I drive a 1996 4Runner that I pulled out of a junkyard, and it's paid for. And one guy was busting my chops about, hey, I drive this piece of shit 4Runner. And I asked him, I said, what do you drive? He goes, well, I got a BMW. I said, really? I said, what do you pay a month? By the way, I don't know. I stuck there. I said, what do you pay a month? He goes, oh, my note's like $900. I said, okay. I said, how much is your insurance? And he said that his insurance was, like $200 a month. I said, okay, so you're spending $1,100 a month for a car and that you don't even like to drive because you're afraid to put miles on it. I said, my 4Runner's paid for. I said, I pay $420 a year. $30 a month is what it costs me to keep that car on the road. $30 a month compared to $1,100. So, can you really not afford a house, or do you just choose to spend your money foolishly? And I think that's, I think it's where it really boils down to. In fact, I'm thinking that I'm going to do a series of videos. I'm going to, about money. I was thinking that there's just too much to talk about money for me to get it done in one episode. I think the first one I'm going to talk about, what is money? How does it work? The vast majority of people do not understand inflation. They just think it's the price of goods going up, but why? What causes it? So I want to have a conversation about what is money? Where does it come from? How does it work? And I think the second video I'm going to talk about money on an international scale, because there's different money supplies, right? There's the M1, M2, M3. There's different money supplies, and how that works and how it affects international policy. You think wars are fought over oil? Well, yes and no. There's more to it than that. It's called the petrodollar, and it's a conversation. And then the third one, I'm thinking that the third one in the series, I'm going to talk about how to make money. People don't understand how business works and how that money can be played to your advantage to help you get ahead. You will never get ahead in this life working for somebody else. And so I'm thinking about that's going to be the next. I'm going to do a series and talk about money. While we're watching Battlefield. By the way, I don't know if you guys ever noticed, these guys with their incendiary grenades. When you catch fire, drop on the ground, right? Stop, drop, and roll, like we all learned when we were kids. Do that. Drop on the ground, roll around a little bit, and the fire will go out. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. So, anyways, and also, the other thing is, you guys have subscriptions to everything. How many video subscriptions do you have? It's funny. I remember when all this cable TV came around, and all of a sudden everybody had to have cable TV because the antenna on top of the roof. You only got 3 or 5 channels. So cable TV, we got 100 channels, and then of course there's nothing to watch on 100 channels. And then everybody thought that streaming was the way to go. And so everybody cut the cord, right? I don't want to pay $100 a month for cable anymore. Well, now you're paying $20 for Netflix, you're paying $10 for Disney, you're paying $10 for Hulu, you're paying, or even if you could combo, whatever, you're still paying $60, $70, $80 a month for video. Watch it on YouTube. You're watching me on YouTube right now. I mean, it's not costing you anything unless you're paying for the ad-free stuff. And you can get around that with a Chrome plugin to bypass the ads. So, and just think about how you're spending your money. I think that's the biggest problem. The Gen Zers were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. I'm not kidding. They really were. They were given everything. I should know. I have Gen Z kids, and I helped create these little monsters because I gave them everything I didn't have. When I was a kid, I got 1, maybe 2 presents for Christmas. We didn't have anything. We would take an old soup can and wash it out, take the paper off it, and we'd play a game called Kick the Can. It was like kickball, but we used a tin can for it because we didn't have any money. I wore my brother's hand-me-downs. My brothers and I would go garbage picking, and we'd garbage picking. That's when you go, to your neighbor's trash cans around the entire block. And we would find old appliances, we'd find old bicycles, and we'd fix them up and we'd sell them, and for extra money. My brothers had paper routes. My eldest brother had the morning, and my second oldest brother had the afternoon. And then after my brothers were killed in the 70s. One at the age of 17, the other one was killed at the age of 16. There's a story there. If you guys want to hear it, I can go over it. It still hurts, so I really don't talk about it much. But that was one reason why we moved in 1979. My mom couldn't stand to be in a house where she raised 2 of her sons, only to see them die. So anyways, when we moved, I had a paper route. I had a paper route at the age of 13. And I was up at 5 a.m., 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Everybody wanted their newspaper. It never ended, even on Christmas Day. And I had that paper route from the time I was 13 until I graduated high school. Every day, 5 a.m. Because, that's where, I didn't get an allowance, right? You want an allowance? Go get a job. And I will never forget this. When I was 17, my father sat me down. He said, "Son, you're going to be 18 soon. And the way I see it, you got 1 of 3 choices." He says, 1, you can get a job and move out. 2, you can join the military and move out. And 3, you can join the military, or you can go to college and move out. So again, watching the gameplay. So I could get a job, move out, join the military, move out, or go to college and move out. And he says, by the way, if it's option 3, you better have a scholarship because I'm not paying for it. And he made it perfectly clear to me that he could not finance my retirement, but I could finance my education. So, things were not peaches and cream for my generation. You guys might think we were, but we weren't. Housing affordability, 12.5% or 12% interest, 12.5% interest. You think that's affordable? My dad, he worked. I love the man. He is the greatest man I've ever known. He worked 7 days a week. 7. He worked as a conductor on a railroad, Norfolk and Southern. It was Norfolk and Western when I was growing up. And then they bought out Southern, so that became Norfolk and Southern. That's what it's called today. 38 years on the rail, 7 days a week. He was never home. He would get a phone call that the train was ready, and he had to meet the train down at the depot, and he'd take the train to another state where he'd spend the night, and then he'd come back the next day with the train coming back. 7 days a week. That man worked 7 days a week to provide for me and my family, or me and my mom and the family. I respect the hell out of him for it. So no one gave him anything. He earned it, and he earned it with a lot of his life. He burned on that rail to take care of us, and that's the kind of dedication and stuff that the earlier generations had. When I went to the academy, I took 24 credit hours, a quarter, not a semester, a quarter, 24 credit hours. You Gen Zers are taking 13, calling it a full-time student. And then you're taking like underwater basket weaving and indoor skydiving and underwater fire prevention and all these gender studies degrees. and then you wonder, and then you can't get a job other than being a barista at Starbucks. Look, basic rule, and anybody that's thinking about going to college or in college, if that college degree doesn't get you a career that will pay for that degree, you're doing it wrong. You should walk out of that college with a degree that will pay for itself. If you're taking some, Bachelor of Arts, origami folding, gender study degrees, don't come crying to me that you guys have student loan debt. Okay, look, we are all the result of our decisions, right? There's that old saying, right? You made your bed, now lie in it. So, true story. My wife does not take me to parties anymore. A number of years ago, when I was foolishly chasing, competing with the Joneses when I was in corporate America, and everybody was, driving nice cars, having extremely nice houses, to show off to everybody on the team, etc. We went to this party, and at the time, I was driving a Mercedes. This is before I realized that it was a money pit and not worth having. But anyways, at this party, the women, this is New Year's Eve, the women were in the house drinking their wine. The guys were out standing around the fire pit drinking their beer. And this one guy had had one or two too many, and he started going off about income inequality, how, it's not fair that there are people in this world driving Mercedes and he's driving a shitbox Dodge. And I kind of stroked my fur on because, I'm driving a Mercedes. And I looked at him and I asked him, I said, in high school, I said, tell me, when you were in high school, did you play football? Yeah, man, I played football. I said, did you date a cheerleader? Damn right, man, I dated a head cheerleader. I said, you know what I did in high school? I studied and I took the hardest classes I could. 5 years of math, including calculus. 5 years of sciences. I took 2 years of chemistry, 2 years of biology and physics. I took Latin and I took Spanish. Hardest classes I could get, so that I could go to I could get admitted into a good school and get a good education and make good money, so I could have that Mercedes that he's complaining about. I said, in high school I didn't date a cheerleader. I said, you don't hear me bitching about the cheerleader inequality, do you? He called me an asshole and went in the house, and my wife came out and said, what are you saying? So, she doesn't take me to parties anymore. Anyways, the point is, the United States is the land of equal opportunity. It is not the land of equal share. You want equal share, go to Cuba. You want equal share, go to China. And let's see that stutter right there. Man, I've got to get that fixed. I swear I die more times from that stutter. So, look at China, right? You got, 12, 15, you got teenagers, 15 years old, whatever, locked. Watch the videos, man. They got bars on the windows at the iPhone factory where these kids are, these people are forced to live. They live there. They're barracks. They you want equal share? There it is, right? You don't badmouth capitalism in my eyes. But anyways, it's the land of equal opportunity. This guy in high school had the same opportunity I had. He could have taken the classes, and he could have, placed a more sure bet to get an education and to be able to make good money, get a good career. It's all a gamble, right? When you make a choice, it's a gamble. I had a cousin who, he was convinced that he was going to be in the NBA. And I'm like, there's two things going against you. One, you're not 7 feet tall, and two, you're white. And but he was convinced, that was what he was gonna, that he was gonna make the NBA. He was good. He's in a small town. He was pretty good at basketball. But I'm like, okay, what's your fallback plan? If that fails, what's your fallback? He didn't have one. So he made his decisions and I made mine. And if you decide to get a gender studies degree, don't go crying to everybody else that you can't get a decent job outside of the barista job at Starbucks. Don't go crying that you have all this college debt you don't know what to do with. You made your decision, and this is one thing that just drives me crazy about the Gen Zers is that they make stupid ass decisions, and then they want everybody else in the world to fix their problems for them. Like mom did when they were little. You're an adult now, or for the most part, you're an adult now. You make your decisions, and you pay the price of those decisions, good or bad. So, anyways, I've been ranting for quite some time. I think I'm pushing 20 minutes. As I said, I am humbled and honored that you guys watch my content and you take time to post. I read every single one of them. I've said it before. I mean it. I don't respond to all of them. I just don't have enough time in the day to respond to all of them. But I read every single one of them, and I am humbled and honored that you do so. After the money series, anything you guys want to hear? Give me suggestions. I'll talk about anything. You want to talk politics? I'll talk politics. You want to talk about how to rebuild an engine? We'll talk about rebuilding engines. You want to talk about how to make more money? We can talk about that too. I've got ideas. You want to talk about just gameplay, if I'm getting better or not. Just let me know what you guys want to talk about. I have ideas, but my last one where I talked about LAN parties seemed to have flopped. It's just not getting the views that I thought it would. But let me know. I'm all ears. I pay attention, and again, I am humbled and honored that you listen and watch me. So that's it for this one. This is Muad'Dib out.